My name is JJ. I'm your new community and education lead here at Softr. Thank you all for joining in. I hope this event is going to be really fun, interactive, engaging. We're going to be building something really fun with Sahil in just a couple of minutes. But generally, I wanted this to serve as a chance for us all to meet, get together, get some feedback from you all of what you love about Softr, what we could do to improve, and just generally bring those vibes, those connections closer to each other, especially with me in this new role. So a quick thing about me before we get into Sahil and introduce him. So I'm joining, I've been in the no code industry for the last 4 or 5 years. I've built agencies, I've led no code teams. I have taught over 1,000 people all different no code tools, and really excited to be joining Softr now and to help them through this new next phase of growth, which is just the product's already incredible, and I'm super excited to see where we're going. So thanks for tuning in. Sahil, tell us a little bit about you and yourself.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. Uh, this is not. It's nice to be here because my no code journey started a couple of years ago. Although I've built apps for many years, I'm a software engineer by training. I was really interested by this new concept of being able to build apps without code. So I went on this exploration, as I shared with you already. And one of the apps that got me super excited was Softr, right? Because the speed at which you can move in this thing was amazing. So it's really nice to be here, actually, like conducting a session, building apps with Softr. But yeah, I actually left my job a couple of years ago to go all in on no code.
And you were a traditional developer, right?
Yeah, I've been coding since I was 14.
And now you
And
choose no code and Softr.
I do no code. I see. The thing is, as an engineer, you should know how to move fast, or you should figure out how to move fast. And I was like, well, I guess this lets me move fast, so I'm just going to go this way. So yeah, and most recently, I have two businesses. One is No Code University, where I teach people these skills, and then also I have an agency, and I help small to medium sized businesses digitize and automate their work, and a lot of it is done through software. So super excited to be here and ready to start building something.
Awesome. Before we get into that, I'm just going to do like a quick 5-minute update on our recent product, what we've launched, what we have coming up. And then if you guys have any questions you want to put in the chat, or features you're looking for, or feedback or anything, do that as well. And we'll try and get to that. So we're heading on over to can you see this all right, Sahil? On your side, yeah, this looks good. Awesome. So recently shipped on our side, we came out with global data restrictions, which is really big. You can now apply these restrictions at an app level per your user permissions. So this goes a long way to just creating safer, better, more secure and performant apps. And I'm really excited to see us do this. It makes it so much easier. And so huge things you can now do with this function and feature set. We also just launched our trigger webhook capability. So I just put a video live on our academy this morning detailing how you could use this better. But simply put, it allows you to trigger a API call. So whether it's a post call, whatever it might be. And so say, for example, you have a listing and you want to update the item record status. You could trigger that API to hit maybe Salesforce to update the status of that employee. And there's so many other things that you could do with it. So triggering webhooks is just the start of really allowing you to interact with so many other things and building this really awesome ecosystem. So really excited for that feature. Also, we have BigQuery coming up as a new data source. It's now in private beta. And this is, I think, going to be pretty big time, especially for larger orgs and for agencies and experts wanting to work with those larger orgs of they already have huge data sets in BigQuery. Now you can connect a UI to it and allow them to access that data much easier and faster. So really excited for that. We have our HubSpot data source as well. This is open. Folks are using it. We have a lot of apps being created with it. Generally, the vibe is that it's awesome to be able to interact with the HubSpot data this way, how easy it is to create new interfaces for your HubSpot data, new client portals for your HubSpot data without worrying about exposing other data that might be private to other customers within HubSpot. So that's been working well. If you guys have any thoughts or haven't had a chance to try it yet, I definitely recommend you checking it out. Some things that we're getting ready to ship soon. So we have our conditional forms, our 2.0 coming up soon. So these are going to include a multi-step, our conditional logic builder, visual flow builder. It's a long time coming. We have been collecting a lot of feedback from you all about these forms, and we're super excited for you all to get your hands on it soon. And just be checking your email. I think in the next couple of weeks, hopefully we can start sending out some more information about it. Yeah, I think it's gonna be really big. We have a upcoming block redesign coming out. If you guys saw yesterday, we started to release a little bit of this with our new grid block and our new grid details or item detail block. Also updated some of our themes for the app. So this is the start to a slower rollout of a more expansive update on our block designs. Generally, they're going to be looking even more better, even more prettier and everything. And so the team that's been doing this, hats off to them because they're putting a lot of effort. It's almost a big rebuild of our blocks design, but it's looking really, really awesome. Yeah. Any questions before we get into Sahil? Anything that you guys might be asking about, like, hey, where is this feature, or when is this might be coming up? You could put it in the chat while Sahil explains to us the build that we're going to be doing and then how we're going to start building it. So Sahil, the screen is yours. If you don't mind just starting off with the final app to show it to us, and then we'll get into the database.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, before I get into that, I was wondering how many people in the audience have actually built an app with Softr before? Any kind of app, basic, doesn't matter the level. But if you have built an app before with Softr, why don't you just put in chat, yes or no? And if you have built an app, maybe just throw some names out there, what kind of apps you have built. See some yes.
I'll throw in that poll.
Okay,
there.
The poll, there we go. So
There we go.
let's do the poll.
Yeah. No, yes. All right. I see some familiar names out there too.
Yeah,
Thanks
there was
for
a yes sir from Cole. I think it's the Cole that I'm
tuning in.
thinking.
Awesome. So we have about 40% saying I've been using it for about 6 months or less. About 30% saying I haven't used it yet. And then we have some experts in the room as well. So
Awesome. Very cool.
there we go.
So that's good to know. Well, that's it's all good. If you haven't used it before, or if you've used it for less than 6 months, all good. I'm going to go step by step here, but just wanted to kind of check the pulse in the room and see who all we got today. So thanks for answering that. And let me show you the sort of the final app before we get into the actual build. I'll go back here and find this final build and open it up. Okay, there we go. So, so we got a pretty
big screen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I got you.
No, you don't need to be implement step by step. We're going to go over it, but we'll give you access to the recording. So if you want to rebuild it afterwards, you could do that too.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so so this is essentially the app. It's a pretty basic app, but a pretty useful one. If you have heard of Clockify or Toggle, those are some SaaS applications that are used to track time for yourself, or if you have a team, you want to track your team's time, where they're spending time. So all of that stuff you can do, but if you want to build something custom in-house and you have very specific requirements around the data that you need to collect from your staff and from your team, you can build that with Softr. So that's kind of the direction we want to go in today. So it's a time tracker, simple app. And basically what happens here is as soon as you log in, you will land on this page where you can see your timesheet and you can see your past work sessions. So, what date it was, what project you were working on, how long, how much time you spent on it, and stuff like that. You can also click on edit to make some changes to it or add some notes to it or update your notes to it. And when you come into work, or depending on how you track your time, some people track time, at the end of the week, or some people track every single session, all good. But essentially you come in here, you click on start session, you'll select a project that you're working on, and you'll start, put in the start time, click on add, and then that will end up here in the in progress table. So it'll show you, okay, currently you're working on this. This was the start time. You haven't added the end time yet. So this is your in progress session. Then you can hit on the end button, which will pull up a similar form, and then you can hit the end date and put some time to it. And once you submit this, then that will update in the backend to as a completed task, and then that shows up here. So there's no more in progress. So that's basic time tracking. Like you start a session, you add some notes, you end the session, then you can see your timesheet. What you can also do is at the bottom of the page, you can see all the projects that you're currently assigned to. So behind the scene, your manager or your team or the company has assigned you to some projects. So those projects will appear here. And then what you can do is you can go into these, you can click on one of the projects and see your time spent towards that project. So I'm currently in the manager view, so I'm seeing some extra stuff. But if you're just the person or the staff member working on a project, you will see exactly what time you spent on it, what you did, all that good stuff. But this one is specific to the project. And then also for the managers, they can see the time spent by their team on this project. So they can see the total time spent this month, this week, so on and so forth. And then lastly, we have a dashboard. Again, this is for the managers, where they can go and see time spent per project by month, time spent by team members, and stuff like that. So this is like a reporting dashboard, so to speak, that typically the company needs to see of where the time is being spent by all their employees and staff members. This one takes a minute to load. Let's see if it comes up.
If not, it's all good.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll be building it, so we can see it then. But that's the app. So there we go. Someone, thanks JJ for adding the 168-hour block. But yeah, you can see. So this is February, how much time was spent in February, and then it's broken down by project. And same thing here. You can see total time by team member, so you can see who's been working, how many hours in the different projects. So those are the charts that we will also show you how to add. And that's pretty much it. And then there's a couple other behind the scenes things like adding roles, configuring the forms, and all that good stuff. So we'll get into that once we start building. But that's the sort of the final app, the time tracker app. So any questions on that before we get into the build?
If you have any questions, generally put it into the chat. Sahil, why don't you get into Airtable or Mira and then start explaining how you put this database together?
Yeah.
I think the important part about this build is you're tracking to a specific project. And I think that's kind of where the database gets more interesting as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to take that away and I'll interrupt with questions as need be.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so obviously, if you have built apps with Softr, or if you have built apps in general, you understand how important it is to get your data designed correct. Because once your data is in place, then building the app becomes much easier. So it's definitely recommended. Step one is that you go look at your requirements and kind of list out what kind of data you need in the backend to be able to support this kind of application. So generally, what I like to do is I go into an app similar to this one. So I personally use Miro, but I list out, and you will have, when you're building apps for yourself or your clients, you will have a list of requirements, the specifications of exactly what needs to happen in this application. So in this app that we're building today, the time tracker app, we have two roles. We have the contractors and we have the managers. And contractors can track their time. They can allocate the time towards a specific project, as JJ just mentioned. They can add task details when they're tracking time, so what exactly they worked on. They can edit the details. They can view their timesheet. They can view the time spent per project. And they can also delete a session if they think they made an entry by mistake, right? So those are the requirements for people tracking the times, the employees and the contractors. And then we have the managers who can, who can then view, time spent by their team per project. They can see the total time spent this month. They can also see the timesheets. They can see the charts and everything. So this is more of a reporting role. And then this one is more of the role which is actually creating and manipulating the data.
And that's where our user permissions come in, right? Because we have specific user permissions for that employee, that contractor, what they can do and cannot do. And then we kind of take those permissions off for them, the manager, where they can kind of see more and do more because they have those higher permissions.
Yeah, 100%. So that's where the roles come in, and the roles have to be defined. And then in the app, we have to define, okay, which role can do what and which role can see what. So some things that the managers can see, the team members might not be able to see, for example. So that's where we have roles, and we will configure those in the app. So once you have these requirements, the next step the recommended step is to kind of think about the data that you need, right? So what all data you would need in your database to be able to support these requirements. So definitely we need a way to have a list of users, right? So your team members, your contractors, your full-time employees, your managers, all of these will be considered users of the application. So we need a table to have users for sure. And then this user table will have very specific details like emails and their role and stuff like that. And then the other thing you need is a place to track the time. So where the users will go in, when they add their time, this has to go and be saved somewhere. So for that, we'll have a dedicated table. We'll call it timesheet for now, the timesheet table. And this is where the time will be tracked, the start time, the end time, and stuff like that. And then finally, as we mentioned earlier, we are tracking time towards very specific projects. So each time entry must have a project associated with it so that we can do the dashboard and the reporting later on and see how the time is being spent. So definitely we need a way to track the projects. And then also there's a line going from users to projects, which is basically indicating that not all users are assigned to all the projects. Every project will have a limited set of users. We won't go into too much detail of this line here, but we do have this relationship which is going to come in handy, which is users to users, and that is basically indicating if who's your manager. So this is like a relationship between the user table. What this looks like in Airtable. So let me go over to Airtable. So it's going to translate exactly the way I showed you in Miro. I have the users table where I have, let me go to the grid view. No, that's good. There we go. Yeah, so we have the users table. So this is our Airtable base. Base is short for database. And we have 3 tables, users, projects, and timesheet, just like I showed you in Miro. So the users table contains all the information about the user, right? So the email, first name, last name, we have the role, and then who's your manager, which links back to one of the users here. And then we have some more details. And one of them is a magic link. I'll get back to that one in a second, but let me just wrap this up, what we have in the tables. The second table that we have is the projects, as I mentioned. So here, all we're tracking is what's the status of the project, who's part of that project, and then we have some other details about the project as well. And then finally, we have the timesheet table. So this is where we have, who's the user, and then what project they're working on, and then we have the start date or time, and then the end date and end time, right? So this is how we're tracking time, and then we have a formula field, which basically calculates, the difference between the end time and the start time, and then we get the duration, which we can then use to calculate the total time spent and all that good stuff. You will see a lot of fields here, but not to worry. So these fields are all calculated fields. The only information that we need from the user is the project that they're working on, when they started the time, when they ended the session, and then what they worked on. That's it. These are the 4 things that the user is supposed to enter. Everything else here is calculated, and this is where the Airtable formulas do their magic. So we can calculate all sorts of things: the date, the time, the range, the month, and there's many other details. And these will become obvious where they use them, where these are used in the app. And then what also we have is, tracking total time per project. Again, all of this is all calculated fields. The only thing we need from the user, as I mentioned, is those 4 fields. Once we have that, everything else we can calculate using formulas and some Airtable magic. Okay, so that's the back end with the base and the 3 tables. Any questions so far?
I think let's get into the Softr build and start seeing how we can bring that together with Softr in real time.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's go over to the Softr Studio, and I will go to a copy of the app that I created. So we have some blank pages to work with.
Great. And then you're using a magic link for your authentication code here, right?
Yes, that's right. So let me explain that. Okay, so what's the setup here? So I have a copy of the time tracker that we showed you earlier. And I've basically made all of these pages invisible because we are going to be creating them from scratch as much as we can in this session. But we still have the home page here. And homepage currently has a couple of things going on. First thing is it has a couple of headers, right? So the reason we have two headers, for those of you who haven't built apps with Softr before, is basically we have to show some things to people who are logged in and show some things to people who are not logged in, people who are just landing on the app from, randomly somehow got the link. So when they land here, and we can see if you click on this block, this is the header block in Softr. And if you click on visibility, it will say this particular header over here will be shown to non-logged in users. But the header above it, if you go and click on the visibility there, it will only be shown to the logged in users, right? So that's why I have two headers here. The logged in users will see the links, they'll see their profile. If I click on that, 1 second, there we go, features. So the logged in users will see a link to the homepage. They will see a link to view their projects, and they will also see a link to view their profile and sign out. But the non-logged in users will just see the logo, nothing else. So that's why I have two headers here.
And those are our primary headers, right? So those can automatically come with us on all the other pages as well.
Yeah, so headers, footers that you add on the homepage will automatically go to all the other pages of the app, so that you don't have to add them individually to all the other pages.
But if you want to edit those, you need to go back to the home page to edit those, correct?
That's exactly right. So since you can only add them from the home page, you also can only edit them from the home page as well. So once we go into another page, you will see if I want to make an edit to the header, it'll say you need to go back to the home page and do it there. But it's not a big deal. Usually I work on the headers after my app is done so that I can just all do it at once. But here we already have them. So so it's good to go. We do need another header later on, which we will add after we build the dashboard, because for the managers, they should also be able to go to the dashboard page, which we don't have here. So we'll build a specific header for them, but we can work on that later.
Right.
So talking about the login block. So what's happening here? And again, for people who have not built apps with Softr, everything in Softr is a block, right? So anytime you want to add anything into your application, what you're adding is a block. And each block comes with a very specific functionality. So this block here is a sign in with code block. So if I were to add, if I click on plus, that's how you add a new block. And if I type sign in, it will show me all the options that I have for the sign-in experience for my users. You can sign in with a username and password. You can have a sign-in block which has an image on the left, and then the input elements on the right. You can have a sign-in with Google block and stuff like that. The one that I chose here is the sign-in with code block, because I hate passwords. So this one, what this allows you to do is when someone lands on your app, it will ask them to enter their email. And once you enter the email, it will send them a code. They enter the code, they're in. And the way that works is, if you remember, I mentioned in the Airtable base, in the users table, we have something called the magic link. And actually, you don't even need the magic link for this one. Magic link takes you directly to the app. For this one, you just need to enter your email. But if I go to the users tab here, you will see all of these emails here are actually coming from the user table in my Airtable base, because I've already connected my app to my Airtable base, and I've already told it that my user information exists in the users table in my Airtable base. So it can automatically fetch the email, the name, and also create a magic link for them, which basically allows you to log in without even having to go through the password or one-time code or anything like that. But for our users, if they don't have a magic link, once they land here on the homepage, they will enter their email, they'll receive a code, and then once they enter the code, they are in. So once they are in, then this block will no longer be visible, because if you click on the visibility of this block, it says only non-logged in users. So as soon as someone is logged in, this block is gone. It'll be invisible, as if the person never saw. So that's the login. But once you're logged in, then we need to actually start building our timesheet and a way for the users to be able to track their time. And for that, what we're going to do is add another block. Because remember, in Softr, everything's a block. Anytime you need to add any functionality, basically what you're adding is a block. So let's click on add a block. And when we add a block, you will see two options. There's a dynamic block option and a static block option. But we're going with the dynamic here because static is basically, your images, your pricing grids and stuff like that. Basically where the data is added once and then it stays the same. It's static, as the name suggests. Dynamic is where we get all of our functionality. So the CRUD functionality, create, read, update, and delete. If you want any interactivity from the users in your app, you're going with a dynamic block. And the one that we're going to use here is the the rule of thumb is when you want to display so multiple of one table. So you want to display multiple records. Like if you're building a timesheet and we want the users to be able to see all the time entries that they have done across over a certain period. So we're adding multiple, we want to show them multiple entries, multiple records from the timesheet table. So that's like a list, right? So it's a list of something, it's a list of time entries. So you will go with a list block, and within the list block, again, you have certain options. You can go, you can have a list with column and cards, you can have a timeline, you can have all sorts of these different blocks that you can use. And actually, where's the table one? Is it not under list? Table. Oh, there we go. So I always thought table is under the list block as well, but it's its own block. So the other option is table. And if you remember in the demo that I showed earlier, we had a table with all the time entries. So I'll go with this, but it's the same thing. It will just list all the entries in a spreadsheet kind of view, in a grid view, versus list as more cards and whatnot. So let's go and add the table block here. Okay, so I click the add button, and then the block is already on the page. And then all we have to do now is configure where the data on this table is going to come from and what happens when we click on this button, where the data will go and be saved. So to do that, you have to connect it to a source. And the source, as I've already connected my app to Airtable, it will already be aware of my Airtable connection. So I click on Airtable, and then next thing is going to ask me which base in your Airtable environment. So I have a sheet called Software Time Tracker, which is essentially this one over here that I showed you right here. And then the next thing is that, okay, so we're asking it to display all the time entries, right? So it's asking us, okay, where is this data coming from? So I'll say this data is coming from the timesheet table. There we go. And it's going to do some magic, and it's going to try to map the data automatically from Airtable to this table over here. It's not always perfect. Sometimes it works great, but that's okay. We can always edit it. And then the last option here is the view. So if you remember, in Airtable, you have multiple views. You have the grid view, you have the user one view, and you can create multiple views. And views are basically some filter data, right? So you can add a filter that blah, blah. So here, you could have a case where you don't want to show everything. You only want to show data from a very specific view. A great example of this is projects, and we'll get to that in a second. I only want to display in progress projects, right? So I have a view for projects that are only in progress. So that would be a great example of something that you select here in the view option. But for now, we just leave it default because we don't need to worry about it for the time one. And what else we got here? Okay, so this is the source setting. So you set your source, you connected it to a table, you connected it to the base and table and everything. So data's already coming in. You will see, we already see user one, user four. We're seeing some stuff already coming in from the table. But to get exactly what we need, we go over to the content tab, and I'm still under the table. So when you click on a block, what you see on the right is the settings specific to that block. So I'm still connected to this block in the settings here. Source already done. So now we're working on the content. So we can start all the way from the top. First thing is title and subtitle, right? So if I turn this on, and then we get this thing over here, and I'll say, just call it timesheet. And we can add a little message here, edit your work sessions in the table below, something like that. And then finally, so you got the title and subtitle. And then, of course, every single feature within the block also has its own settings, right? So when you click on this, we get the settings for the block. But when we click on a certain thing or certain feature within the block, you get settings specific to it. So for example, if you wanted to align the title on the left, you could do that. If you wanted to align the title on the right, you could do that as well. Or if you wanted to make the heading bigger, you see this little brush icon. You click on that, and you can make the heading bigger. So everything is configurable. The blocks are just a starting point, and then you can decide how you want them to look and feel. Very good. So title, subtitle. The next thing we see here is some filters. We'll come back to that in a second after we have configured our data. It'll make more sense then. But to configure the data, we will go all the way down to the item fields section. And the item fields essentially correspond to each column in this table, right? So the first one, it already configured, is image. And I'm just going to delete it. I don't need an image in this table. I'll delete the status one as well. I'll actually delete all of them. let's just start from scratch. There we go. Let's start from a blank table. So add fields. So it'll ask you what kind of field do you want to add. So I'll say, because what we need to show from this table, we are in the timesheet, right? So we need to show the start date, we need to show the end date, we need to show the duration. So we need to show all of these things. We can
Member.
just show, sorry?
Is it the member as well?
Not member on this one because it'll only be your data, right? So you're logged in.
Ah,
Yeah, so you don't need to see your name. We
yeah.
actually do need to add that filter. So let's start with text, and we'll say, actually, let's start with, so when we start with text, it'll ask you, okay, so what text should we display here? So this is where your data from the table comes in. So we'll say, can we display the date? Okay, so let's click on date, and then the column name will just be called date. There we go. So now we are seeing the date for all the entries here already. So next thing I want to show, again, it'll be a text field. So we'll say text, and I want to show the start time. So let's see if you have something for start time. So I have a field for that. And now it's going to show me the start time here, and I can rename the field to start time. And then we duplicate it one more time. And we can show our end time here. And of course, this is all personal preference. It'll depend on the requirements of your app that you're building. And I'm going with some basic assumptions here that we're showing start time, end time. And we can also show another text field. We can show the duration because we have all this data in Airtable, so we can pull that in.
And that's one of the benefits of having those calculated fields in Airtable is you've already done the calculations. Now you can just view it here.
Exactly. So that's why data is super critical because remember the ones that I just pulled in, I pulled in the date field. It's a formula field. It's automatically getting the date from the start date.
Yep.
I pulled in the start time. I pulled in the end time. It's automatically getting the time from the start time and the end time. So here, all I have to do is map it to the right field, and then we get our content here. And then the last one, maybe we can show the notes that you added. So you know exactly what you worked on. And we'll call this notes. There we go. So now in this table already, we are seeing, we have data automatically coming in from Airtable. We're seeing the start time, end time, duration, everything. And as you're building these things, you don't have to stay, just in the studio mode. You can always click on the preview button and see how the app is going to look for the end user. So this is currently showing me a non-logged in user. So non-logged in user is currently seeing the sign in, and they're also seeing the timesheet. So that's not great. So that's why you do the preview. So you know, okay, I need to fix this. The non-logged in user should not be seeing this, right? So that's why you will always test. So preview is basically testing what you're building as you are building it. So this is what we are seeing right now. And if you click on the add record, it says it's not been configured yet. Perfect. So that's something we need to do. So let's go back to the studio. So first thing I'm going to fix is the visibility for this thing. I'm just going to go to the visibility tab here, and I'll make sure that it's only visible to the logged in users. There we go. And then now if we preview it, it'll open it up in the same tab again. And now we only see the sign in box, and we don't see the timesheet because it's only for logged in users. And if I flip this to a logged in user, then it will show us the other view, which will be, we will not see the sign in, but we will see the table. There we go.
Is there a reason why you're keeping the sign in and the table on the same page?
Nothing particular. I didn't have, because this is an internal app, so I didn't think that this kind of app will have like a landing page or something like that. So basically, you sign in and you're right there.
Yeah, so you don't have to load the page.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have to redirect or anything like that.
Yeah.
If I had multiple things, I would put it on a different page because then I will not have to do the setting on each block independently. I could just do the setting on the page level.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something to think about. Okay, so let's keep building this here a little bit. So we're still in the timesheet view. So one thing we need to do here, I don't know if you can tell, but the dates are kind of all over the place, right? Like I'm seeing March and then I'm seeing February. So if you go back to the source, there is an option to sort the data, right? So we'll sort the data and we'll use the date field for it. And these are the same dates from Airtable. So you can sort them by date. You can sort them from top to bottom or the other way around. So I guess for this one, I want to see the latest entry at the top. So I'll do a reverse sort. So there we go. So now I see March 25th, the 4-hour work shift that we had. And then you can also decide how many entries you want to show here by default. So maybe we can make it 10. a bit much, maybe. Let's make it 7. That should be enough. And then what happens after 7? So there's a setting for that as well. You can see a pagination option, which is you click on the next button, it'll load the next 7, and so on and so forth. Or you can click on load more button, which will basically keep increasing the length of your table within the same view versus taking you to a different page. So again, personal preference. And then you can also label what you want to name the button here. And that's called the label here. So that's the sort. And the most important thing we need to do here that we haven't done yet is, so imagine you log in and you should only see your own timesheet, your own entries. Currently, we are seeing everyone's entries, everything that we have in the database. So that's not good, because this should be our own timesheet based on the requirements that we have. So what we need to do to prevent that from happening is we use the filter option here. So we'll say add a condition, and if the user field, because remember, in my timesheet, this is the table we are loading, I have a user field. So I can filter by user, just like I filtered by user 1 here. If I can also filter by user 4, so I only see there. So similarly, we need to filter in Softr so that it only shows us the entries for a particular user. And which user should that be? Audience question. So what should be the value here? So remember, the requirement is I only want to see entries for a given user, not all the users, but which user is the question. Let's go to the chat.
We got the logged in user and the current logged in user. There we go.
You got it exactly right. So go back to the studio, and for the setting here, the value of this filter, we have an option to get some data from the logged in user. Because remember, these users are connected to our table in Airtable over here. So Softr has awareness of all the information about this logged in user, and we can leverage that for our filters. Go back to the page, go here. And then in the filter, let's see if it remembered my settings or no. I'll just start from scratch, no worries. So if the user includes exactly logged in users, let's say user ID, there we go. And just to make sure this is working in the content, I will add the username for now.
Now, that user ID, is that something that you actually created yourself in Airtable?
I did. So I have typically for my unique, the primary key field.
Yep.
I always do
table name.
I do like the table name dash number. So basically the formula is this text string and then the ID, which is an auto number generated by Airtable.
Okay, cool. So anytime you create a new record, automatically that will be filled in with it.
Exactly. Yeah, there we go. So user 7.
Yep. Great. And it just makes it easier to just find that specific unique user rather than maybe searching for their email or whatever.
Exactly that. And also in Airtable also, because it's a linked record here, now I see it's user 4. Had it been like a random string or had it been the record ID, like I don't know who this person is. So this way it's easier to it's easier to read also.
Right. And can you just show the linked record, the field type in there?
Yeah. So the user field type in timesheet here is a linked record. So basically it is linked to the user table. So you have all the options here. So you select link to another record, and then it will show you all the tables that are available. But this one is linked to users.
Yeah. And this is a really important relationship. You're allowing from your timesheet table to bring in the data from your user table and make a connection between those two to create this relational database. And so these fields are really important in database building.
100%. Like relational, you can't go far without these relations. And you can also see, you can visualize here in Airtable how the fields are linked to each other. So you can see this one that we just talked about. We were in the timesheet table. So the user is linked to the user table. So this is the user in the timesheet table. It's linked to the user. So this is just a simple view. But if I were to turn on all the formulas and roll-ups and everything, you'll see how complicated this gets. There's a lot of data going on. So I'll just keep it for that. So back here, I was going to add one more field here. I'll just make it a text field also, and make it the user field. There we go. And we will delete this. We don't need it. We'll just use it for testing. Okay, so now we have our filter, and we should be able to test it. So if you go to preview, okay, there we go. So this email, Sahil Khosla plus test, is user 5 here. So now I'm only seeing the entries for user 5. So that means our filter is working, which is good. So let's go
And
back.
it's always something you need to test. Even though you
One-
put in a conditional filter, you need to just verify it on yourself, on your page, because security is just one of those things that we need to be extra careful with.
100%. Yeah. That's why I specifically add this field. I'm not making any assumptions here. I want to make sure, I'm seeing exactly what I should be seeing. And nice thing about this is, and I had a chat about this with Arthur a while back, because if you get really savvy, if you go into the network tab, and if you see the API calls that are being made, you can see that it's trying to filter by user, which got me worried for a second, because I thought, like, if I can see the filter on the front end, then I could potentially manipulate the filter and the value and get some other data out of it, even though I'm not supposed to be seeing it. But actually, the filtering happens on the back end. So Arthur confirmed that you can't hack your way into it. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's delete that one since we don't need it. And perfect. Okay, so now let's talk about how do we add time. So far we're just seeing, so we're seeing the read part, but now we want to talk about the add part and also the edit part. So what we'll do, we by default in this table get a button here called add record button. And the way you edit this or modify this is there's a specific tab here. And actually, this is pretty nicely laid out if you think about it. You start with the source, you map some content, and the next thing you need to do is configure some actions. So you can just go left to right and configure all the details. So we go to the next one here, actions, and we already have an add record button here, but it's not configured, because you remember if in the preview when I clicked on add record, it said it's not being configured because we haven't made any connections to it yet. So what we can do is, first of all, we can change the name of it. So I'll change it to start session or something like that. It could be like clock in or whatever, depends on the use case. And then if you expand this tab here, basically what it's asking is, what kind of information do we need to collect from the user? Because when you click on this, it's going to show a form that the user is supposed to fill. And then you need to map those form fields to your database so the information can be stored correctly. We are definitely not asking for an image. Actually, it could be a good use case where you need to, when you're tracking your time, you also need to take a photo of something. Like I see a lot of Uber. I see the Uber Eats example where you do that, but there could be a use case for that, no problem. So there is that option as well. But for us, what we need is we just need the start time. So I'll change it to a date time field, and I'll map it to the start date field. So I'm mapping it to this one over here, this date field. So this is something that the users can edit. Everything else, remember, we calculate, but this is the input that we need from the user. So the start date field, and we will call it start date and time. And this is a required field. And then for next one, I will change it to date time also. And this one will be mapped to the end date. And this will be called end date time. And this is not required at this stage because maybe when you're starting the session, you're just starting and then you just let the clock run and then you end it at a later time. So we'll make this optional. And then finally, we need a field for the notes. So this will be a rich text field. And this will be mapped to our notes field in Airtable. And describe, we'll just call it describe the task or something like that. And again, this doesn't need to be required at this stage. It will be required in the other form, which we will build in a second. And I don't need a rating. What else needs to go here? Right. So this, let me just quickly or preview this and see what we get so far. Okay, so now if I click on start a session, I will see this form where I can select the start date, I can select the time,
The beautiful thing here is that forms are automatically created for you, and it's just assigned to the fields that you just set up, saving you a lot of time.
100%. Yeah, I didn't have to manually go build this form, which forms are a pain. Like as much as they're used on the web, building them from scratch are like just pain.
It's just laborious, and this is a good looking form. It's going to get the job done, and it's more than enough.
100%. And you get the rich text editor here. You can put bullet
Right.
points, everything. So, so we can quickly like make a test session. And if I add it, it was added to Airtable. So let's go and check here. Go to grid view, go all the way to the bottom.
There it is.
There it is, test session. But there's a problem. The user is missing. So we don't know who added this. And that obviously is not great. So we need to fix that. But if you remember, in the fields, we configured all the fields. So how the heck do we get the user in there? Any
Well,
ideas?
first off, well, people, if you have any ideas, put it in the chat. But I love how as soon as you finished your CRUD, you created anything, you went and checked your database to see what values actually came through,
Mhm.
make sure that you hit all the fields that you needed in your create operation there.
100%. And yeah, we are taking it for granted here. But again, as we mentioned in the forums, if you build it from scratch, there's the API call, there's the API keys, there's the connections to be made, there's a server. It's just a lot of work. And this is just like unbelievable.
So Nicholas has the answer for us, I believe.
You got it right, Nicholas. So if we also want to track the user, right, from the form, like who made the entry, but we don't want to ask the user to select the user. That's a lot of work. That's not how your apps work. Forget Gen Z; they'll not even use. Just kidding. So what you can do is we want to track the user, and remember, the app is aware about the logged in user, so we can click on Add Field, and there's a field type called Hidden. So this is the data we need to pass into Airtable, but not necessarily ask the user to select it. So we can map it to the user field. And for the value, we can select it already. So we'll say logged in users, user ID. There we go. So
and you can add as many of those as you need.
You can add as many as you need. One thing I wish we had, but we don't have right now, is like the timestamp from like now. So I could just hit the start time button, and it would automatically take that time.
Yeah.
We don't have the feature yet, but
Yeah.
feature
Current
announcement
date kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now if we preview, let's make one more entry. Again, 15th, select some time, test session with user, add, and actually you can see it right away. The data got refreshed and we see this entry. We didn't see the other one because now the user value was passed in and this table is filtering by this current user. So this data already showed up here. So we don't even have to go to Airtable, but we can go and we can see that the user 5 was already automatically added through the hidden field. Very good. So what else we got? So that's how we would start a session. But now what about the ending the session, right? We have an entry here. We see that this session is currently running. Now I want to come in and exit out of the session or end the session. How do we do that?
Yeah.
Well, we need to add another button for that, and that will be the update. So we already created some data. We are reading some data. We created some data. Now we need to talk about update the data. So for that, we have some more options here. So this was the top bar button. But what we're going to add next is an item button. So this button is going to show up next to every entry in the table. So click on item button, and then we'll click on, there we go, edit record. So we add that, and right away in the table, we see this edit button here. And we can rename this. We can say, this is a, there we go. So we can rename to end session, or to save time, we can just say end, or actually, let's just keep it update because you could be updating notes as well. And then in the fields, we again need to give them all the options. So we should be able to update the notes, no problem. It's already mapped. And then what we need is the end time as well. So that will be again a date time field. It's pretty much the same form again, but mapped to an update action. So this will be end date time. And this time it will be required. And we can move this up. So I won't even bother about adding the start date here for now. Let's just, since we're running out of time, let's just click here and see if you're able to update our session. Okay, so now next to each entry, we see the update button. We click on this, we see this form show up, and both of these are required fields. So you can change the notes if you wanted to add some more notes, you can do that. And then you can select your end time. So let's say you ended the session, it started at 6, I believe. Let's end it at 7:30. Go and update. There we go. So now we can see that this one started at 8 a.m. and it has negative here. But I thought it was 6, but
it still worked though.
It still worked. Yeah,
point proven. You have that CRUD, you have the update. Excellent.
There we go. So we don't want any negative sessions here. Okay, there we go. So now we see the duration 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we see the notes as well. So now we got the create, we got the read, we got the update, and the only thing left is delete. So if you accidentally added a session or you no longer want to record it, you can definitely do a delete as well. And for that also, the inline button will make sense. So you can add multiple of these. So I can add one more item button here. And for this one, we'll say delete record. And delete is basically just a confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete? And that's pretty much it. And if you hit yes, it's going to delete it for you. So let's click on preview. And now you see this extra 3 dots menu here. You click on this, the delete button shows up, and it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to delete this item? Click on delete button. Boom, it's gone. Let's go to Airtable. Gone. I think this is from earlier. So delete that as well. There we go. So that was the one where we didn't have a user. So both of those are gone now. So delete is working as expected. So we have our full CRUD from, if you remember from here, we have all of these things happening in the app already within like 30 minutes.
Yeah, really, really great. Why don't we open it up for some questions here?
Yeah.
And kind of see where we're at. I have one more advanced question for you. So this one is from Noon. And let's see, can I bring this up onto the stage? Can you see it on your side?
Yeah, I can see it.
And then do you mind just turning off the the infinity on your side? There we go. Great. All right, so building a time tracking app, but it deals with recurring weekly availability. So I use text fields rather than a date field. Software won't allow me to filter it on the front end in order to have it listed in my Airtable. The option shows up, but I can't click it and don't know why. Sounds like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing. How would you handle recurring weekly availability?
Wait, so what's happening here? So I'm building a time tracking app, but it deals with recurring weekly availability. So I use, what does that mean? Can we bring?
Yeah, so I believe, and Noon, feel free to chime in here, but I believe it's, if you have every Tuesday from like 3 to 5 p.m., you're booked at this appointment kind of thing. And then you're trying to figure out how to structure that in your database.
I see. So building time tracking MSL is recurring weekly availability. So I use text field rather than date field. Software won't allow me to filter it on the front end or just, that's something you have to take a look at the base. I can't answer it without actually understanding the requirements, but I'm happy to stay back and discuss this further.
Yeah, I think it's just generally how do you set up recurring? So it's like infinity, and sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that what that could do, there could be a form that allows you to make an entry and you check a box and you say that, okay, this is a recurring entry. Airtable then knows about this checkbox and assumes and has some kind of a filter or some kind of an automation in there that runs on a daily, weekly basis that will basically duplicate that entry for you. So I think that would be the way to approach it.
Interesting. You could also maybe look at just kind of using like a yes or no field, and it's like you create a new date and it's recurring yes or no. And then maybe if the date is there and the recurrent is yes, and it always shows up on Tuesday for that date or whatever until it's marked as no, something like that.
Right. Yeah. The entry will have to be created somehow, though. I think, and the automation is the way to go to. It's almost like a nightly job that runs and checks all the entries. And if anything is checked, recurring, duplicate it.
Yeah. All right. We got another one here from Andrew. I'm building an app to connect nearby folks to do activities. Is there a feature or integration to enable a user to list optional start times and the second or third participants can influence this based on primary users' options?
Hmm. Connect nearby folks to do activities that are future integration or enable user start times, and the second can influence this based on the primary user's options. Start times. Okay, so yeah, that could be done. So basically, it would be multiple fields, right? So you have option one, option two, option three, and all of those will be time fields. And you can ask the user to say, I can start at 6, I can start at 7, I can start at 7:30, and the other participants can then filter by start time, right? And they can see, okay, is there anything between 6 and 7, or they can filter by that start time. Uh, that, yeah, something like that could be done for sure. I'm not sure about the influence part.
Yep.
There could
Yeah.
be an upvote. There's an upvote feature. So if someone prefers a particular time, they can upvote that. And then the one that bubbles up to the top can, you know, that could be the influence part, I guess.
Yeah. We have another one from Noel where I was wondering about your planning process for automations for your projects. How do you structure them?
How do I structure them? The automation itself or all my automations as a whole? I can answer both of them. The automation themselves, always the first thing is I map it out in the Miro board. I just want to map out, all the apps that are going to be part of this automation, and then the automations themselves. I use personally Make, so I have folders to separate them. I don't know if that's exactly the question, but
Yeah, I think generally, we have a lot of options to use for automations, Make, Zapier, a lot of other ones. When you're thinking about an automation, just break it down step by step. What do you need to do first? And then what is that next step, and work through it in that way. I think take it one step at a time. I don't think you
yeah,
need to plan out all of your automations before build. I think it's first important to think about what you need from the user, what kind of data you need to show, what kind of data you need to collect, because that will help you figure out your database structure. And then from there, you can start laying your database structure of, well, I need users, so I need a user table. I need projects, so I need a project table. And on the projects, I want to show the project date, I want to show the project lead, and the project location. Well, I need those three fields in order to collect that information and to show that information, right? So start there with your UI, then into your database, and then eventually you get to your automations of, now how do I create these things, bring these things to life?
yeah. Airtable also has the feature to create folders, so it really helps. So and I organize them by table, so I know these automations affect this table, these automations affect this table, so that way. And also, there's a way to describe the automation, so don't just leave them unnamed. Definitely add a name per automation, so you know exactly what it's doing.
Yeah. Sahil, as we wrap up in the last couple minutes here, do you have any advice for people getting started with Softr today? If you're just getting started for the first time, you want to build your app, whether it's for your personal or your business, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, great question. So definitely, as I said, data is the critical part. So just to get familiar with software, you can, come in, click around, just like hit the buttons. Nothing can go wrong.
Get a
But
template.
yeah, get a template, see like exactly what each button does, preview the app, make some changes, then see what the effect is. Kind of just like play around with it. But then I keep repeating myself here. But then data becomes really critical. So you have to kind of just have a basic understanding of what data you need in your database. And a great way to do that is software templates. In the code world, we tell people to read code because that's a great way to learn. Here, it's templates. So you duplicate a template. It also gives you the Airtable base with it. So you can go and read the base and see how that is set up, and then see what effect it has on the. So reading some already built apps, exploring already built apps is a great way to kind of get familiar. And then obviously try to duplicate it. That would be another way to try to recreate the template from scratch.
Yeah, I think templates are a great way to get started, especially to look around. I also think it's great to have like an idea of what you want to build before you get started. So that way you have some kind of direction of, okay, I need this. Now I need to do this next, right? And that kind of helps guide your learning. And we have tons of videos on our YouTube channel, at our academy. Experts like Sahil have it on his channel as well. So there's a lot out there. And hopefully we have more than enough for you to get started. But if not, we have our forum and everything else that we could do to help support you.
100%.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you all for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to drop Sahil's LinkedIn here. So if you want to connect with him, feel free to connect with him. Really appreciate all that he did to prepare for this. I hope you all learned a ton in this process. And if you have just general feedback, I'm going to drop my email here. I'm your community and education lead. Let me know what I can do to help you, whether you need more education, more community events, different types of events. Let me know so I can help you find more success with Softr. Awesome.
Yeah, likewise. Feel free to reach out anytime. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Sahil. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks, team. See you guys later.